300,000 troops from the northern clan were about to attack the border city belonging to the Sichuan kingdom. General Gusha, who led the northern clan troops, ordered the 1st Division troops to carry out the attack. Arrows were released to signal the front line to prepare to attack. Meanwhile, the Sichuan kingdom only had 50,000 troops and was certainly heavily outnumbered. This man was Sichuan Su, a general from the Sichuan kingdom who possessed a power beyond human reason. He suddenly appeared from under the ground and immediately killed General Gusha. Not only that, but he also replaced the enemy's arrows to signal the northern clan troops to immediately withdraw from the battlefield. As a result, the northern clan troops who saw the sign immediately retreated. Seeing that, the Sichuan kingdom troops felt strange. A deputy general named Bai Chuan immediately went to the base camp to wake up their general who had been hiding in bed during the war. It was clear that Xiu was pretending to be lame and weak so that his troops wouldn't know that he possessed such a power beyond human reason. Bai Chuan reported that the northern clan suddenly withdrew from the battlefield so that they won the war. Xiu just smiled and felt happy that finally the war was over. Bai Chuan was very annoyed with his general's attitude, who looked very weak, not knowing that it was her general that made the enemy troops withdraw from the war. After that, Xiu checked the casualties that had fallen from the enemy, and managed to capture the princess of the northern clan named Kadan. The troops asked him to kill Kadan, but he immediately embraced her and asked her to go to the base camp so she wouldn't be killed. Meanwhile, in the capital of the Sichuan kingdom, the news about Xiu's success in winning the war from the northern clan's 300,000 troops had already been heard. Everyone considered it impossible. The defense minister of the Sichuan kingdom, Mr. Yang, still couldn't accept Xiu's victory, thinking he was working with the northern clan. Meanwhile, Bai Chuan and the other troops also couldn't believe they could win. Bai Chuan suspected that their general had done something secretly, and he suspected that Xiu was secretly working with the enemy kingdom and being a traitor. Long story short, Xiu collected all the belongings of the northern clan troops that they managed to capture to put them in a box that would be sent to the commander, who was also Xiu's teacher, Yinxing, as proof of victory. A leather from General Gusha's neck was seen held by Xiu and put in the box. Everyone there was unaware that it was human skin. Yinxing soon after received the box and was very surprised to see the human skin with a tattoo on it. He realized that Xiu had killed General Gusha from the northern clan. Meanwhile, Mr. Yang, the Minister of Defense of the Sichuan Kingdom, met the king. It was revealed that the previous king was killed during the war. The king adopted a boy named Xiu, who was tasked with guarding the border city. Since the previous king had died, the one who replaced the king's position was his brother, the current king who ruled the kingdom, but it was clear that Mr. Yang didn't seem to give any respect at all to him. The king was very annoyed by the attitude of Mr. Yang, and he realized that Mr. Yang intended to carry out a rebellion to seize the position of king in the kingdom. Meanwhile, in the border city, Xi received a letter from Mr. Yang ordering him to go to the capital to report the results of the war. He immediately remembered the incident 7 years ago, when he was tried and would be sentenced to death by Mr. Yang, who accused him of being the cause of the previous king's death on the battlefield. Even though in the past he had fought desperately to protect the king, but instead he was slandered by Mr. Yang, who deemed him incapable of protecting the king. The death penalty was then abolished, considering that Xiu was the king's adopted son, and he was sent to the border city to guard it. Mr. Yang with his men was seen making swords every day. Mr. Yang's servant, Da Lin, received information that Xiu would soon return to the capital. Lin, who had a bitter grudge against him, intended to kill him but was stopped by Mr. Yang, because he called Xiu back to the capital to be examined regarding the victory against the northern clan, which was considered impossible. Long story short, Xiu and Bai Chuan had arrived at the capital. They stopped by the brothel to ask about anything that had happened in the capital, but suddenly Lin and his troops arrested them on the accusation that Xiu had returned to the capital and delayed to meet Mr. Yang, who summoned him. The two fought in a room, but in reality, they turned out to be friends and were pretending to be enemies, Lin was angry because Xiu returned to the capital while knowing that Mr. Yang wanted to kill him and would do anything to do it. Returning to the capital was the same as seeking death. Xiu answered that he was coming home to ask for a reward for his victory against the Northern Clan. What's more, it had been 7 years since he didn't return. Xiu was put in prison, but Lin had prepared an escape route for him so that he could escape from there secretly and meet with Lin again. Not only that, Scifi also turned out to be Shu and Lin's friend. After 7 years of not seeing Shu, they were happy to finally meet again. The next day, Lin was having a meal together with Mr. Yang. Luo, Mr. Yang's right-hand man, kept urging Mr. Yang to bring Xiu to court on accusations of collaborating with the Northern Clan because it was impossible for Xiu to win in the war. With that accusation, they could kill Xiu. Lin, who heard this, could only remain silent. The next day, Lin met Scifi and told him the problem regarding Mr. Yang, who intended to kill Xiu on accusations of collaborating with the Northern Clan. As friends of Xiu, the two planned so that Xiu could be freed from this accusation. However, they needed not to be seen with each other so as not to arouse suspicion. Meanwhile, Mr. Yang ordered Lu to be killed immediately. Lu was ready to carry out the orders. He immediately ordered his men to go to the prison and took Xiu with the reason that the king wanted to see him. When he was taken out, Xiu began to realize that he wasn't taken to the king's residence. Moreover, the troops who took him were not like prison guards. Caught red-handed, the troops attacked him, but even with his hands tied, Xiu could easily finish them all. After that, he entered someone else's horse-drawn carriage to escape. Inside, he met the princess of the kingdom, the daughter of the previous king, Ning, who disguised herself as a man so she could get out because he had received information that Xiu had returned to the capital. Ning immediately took him home to treat the wound in his body. Ning was Xiu's childhood friend. Not only that, Xiu was the man she loved, and she missed him very much. Short story, Xiu, Lin, and Scifi gathered to discuss the next mission. They already knew that Mr. Yang was preparing a movement to carry out a rebellion to seize the position of king in the kingdom. The problem was that the troops that wanted to kill Xiu before were Mr. Yang's troops, and because Xiu failed to be killed, he would be brought to court for trial. Xiu would certainly be accused of working with the Northern Clan. Before that could happen, Lin and Scifi intended to send him out of the capital, but unfortunately, Xiu refused the idea. He intended to clear his name from this accusation, but suddenly he fainted because it turned out that the food he ate was poisoned by his friends. He was sent out of the capital using a horse to keep him safe. Meanwhile, Mr. Yang received a report that the troops he sent had failed to kill Xiu. To avoid the suspicion that it was his doing, he ordered the troops to immediately leave the capital. After that, he sent one of his best men to kill Xiu. Mr. Yang then went to see Mr. Xiao to make false accusations that she was proven to be collaborating with the Northern Clan and was labeled a traitor. Tomorrow he would bring Xiu's body to court. If this plan is successful, then there will be nothing to stop him from carrying out a rebellion. Listening to that, Mr. Xiao is willing to do his job. The next day, Mr. Xiao, the Minister of Court, summoned Xiu to come so that he could be examined. The scenario began to be carried out. Lu gave false evidence about Xiu being a traitor and secretly collaborated with the enemy kingdom so that they could win the war, and after that would help the enemy kingdom to destroy their kingdom from within. Not only that, Lu also showed a corpse he claimed to be Xiu, who died from poisoning himself because he was found to be a traitor. Scifi didn't believe the corpse was Xiu. Surprisingly, Xiu came to court. He then laughed to see that Lu claimed the corpse to be him when he was still alive and standing in front of everyone. Mr. Xiao immediately acted by sentencing one of the troops there who had made a slander if she was dead to death. He deliberately did that to save his reputation. Lu said that he had received information during the war against the Northern Clan that Xiu was hiding in the base camp. He couldn't have possibly repelled 300,000 troops belonging to the Northern Clan while he was sleeping in the base camp. Moreover, Xiu deliberately did not report that the princess of the Northern Clan, Kedan, had been captured. Because of this, she was suspected of collaborating with the enemy. Xiu just laughed it off because Mr. Xiao and Lu were trying to slander him. Cai Yilin said that if they wanted to punish Xiu on the charge of being a traitor, the court had to have proof, but from what they had seen, Mr. Xiao and Lu did not show any evidence that Xiu was a traitor. Not long after that, Mr. Xiao summoned Bai Chuan, Xiu's deputy general. She was forced to admit that Xiu was a traitor. She admitted that Xiu had indeed been at the base camp during the war, but she confirmed that he was not a traitor because the weather in the border town was very cold. Let alone walking long distances to reach the Northern Clan base camp, having a meal was already a big problem for them. She was always on Xiu's side, and she never saw Xiu meet anyone from the Northern Clan. Mr. Xiao did not accept her confession and instead ordered her to be sentenced to death because she gave a false statement and supported the betrayal committed by Xiu. Listening to this, Xiu immediately acted by threatening to kill anyone who dared to touch Bai Chuan. Xiu was angry with Mr. Xiao for accusing him without evidence, even though he had been desperately fighting against enemy troops in the border city. Instead of getting a prize for winning, he was slandered. Ignoring that threat, Mr. Xiao sentenced Xiu and Bai Chuan to death. Not long afterward, the king and Ning came to stop the debate. As a king, he didn't support anyone and tried to be neutral. He then conveyed that before Xiu was sentenced to death, he wanted to eat with him one last time. After all, Xiu was the adopted son of the late king. The king made Mr. Xiao inevitably comply with his request. Cai Yilin reported the results of the trial to Lin. Mr. Xiao seemed to have collaborated with Mr. Yang to sentence Xiu to death, therefore they both had to do something before it happened. In prison, Ning kept crying because Xiu would be sentenced to death. Xiu told her to leave before he was executed. He remained calm because he would not die that easily. He ordered the king, his adoptive uncle, to take Ning away from the prison. The day of the execution had arrived. Bai Chuan looked so scared, but not Xiu, who looked calm and laughed, while Cai Yilin and Lin, complete with their troops, were ready to attack when the executioner was about to kill Xiu. At the same time, Mr. Yang heard the war horn, which indicated that Yin Xing had returned to the capital. He realized that his plan to kill Xiu would definitely fail. Sure enough, when the executioner was about to execute Xiu, suddenly Yin Xing's troops came to stop them. If the executioner still insisted on doing it, they would attack. Later that day, Mr. Yang was visited by Yin Xing at his residence to stop Xiu from being sentenced to death by the Ministry of Court. He'd also said that Xiu was not a traitor by explaining that the troops of the Northern Clan withdrew from the battlefield because Xiu was helped by King Ming, who killed General Gusha. Mr. Yang was very surprised to hear that since King Ming was the greatest warrior in the world and no one had ever seen his figure, King Ming was nothing more than a legend. Yin Xing gave General Gusha's neck skin with a tattoo on it. That was enough to prove Xiu was not a traitor. Seeing that, Mr. Yang couldn't do anything. He would send an order to the Minister of Court to remove the charges against Xiu. Short story, Xiu was brought home by Ning. He intended to show Xiu's room, which had not been occupied for a long time. He was just about to enter when a servant called. Xiu immediately left, leaving Ning, who was very annoyed at being left behind by him. It turned out that Xiu was summoned by Yin Xing. The teacher told him to return to the border city, but of course, Xiu rejected it. He would remain in the capital because he knew that Mr. Yang was planning to carry out a rebellion in the capital, and he would not remain silent. Hearing that, the two of them planned something to thwart that. Xiu would remain in the capital to monitor the movements of Mr. Yang, while Yin Xing would hold a meeting with a messenger from the Northern Clan because, after all, Kaidan, the princess from the Northern Clan, was being held hostage by them. Using that advantage, Yin Xing intended to create peace between the two kingdoms. The next day, Ning invited Xiu to play music together, but just when they were about to start, Xiu intended to leave and invited her to play music together on her birthday instead. Ning was annoyed, but she tried to respect his matter. It turned out that Xiu went to the late king's grave to pay his respects. The reason he continued to stay away from Ning was not because he didn't love her, but because there were still many problems and conflicts that he had to resolve. He didn't want Ning to get involved in these problems, afraid she would get hurt. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king gathered all the ministers to hold a meeting. Yin Xing intended to use Kadan, the princess of the northern clan, to make peace. He wanted these two kingdoms to be at peace to stop the war, but it seemed that some didn't agree with peace and wanted to keep fighting. Yin Xing said that the border city residents wanted to live in peace, and if they continued to wage war, many innocent citizens would become victims. Moreover, the border city was experiencing a crisis. By using Kadan, the princess of the northern clan, they could force the enemy to make peace. Only then could residents in the border city live in peace and safety. The king was about to leave, but Mr. Yang suddenly shouted, saying he agreed with the decision, and that they had to prioritize the welfare of the people in the border city. It turned out that Mr. Yang's reason for supporting the peace was that he had a plan to destroy the peace so that in the future, Yin Xing would be blamed and the war between the two kingdoms continued. Later, Yin Xing and the king were discussing Mr. Yang, who wanted to carry out a rebellion. They both already knew that Mr. Yang was just pretending to agree to the peace and definitely had a plan behind it to destroy the peace. Yin Xing asked the king to be calm, as he would create peace between the two kingdoms, and after he succeeded, he would help the king face Mr. Yang. Meanwhile, Xiu, Lin, and Lin met again. Lin told them a big secret that Mr. Yang would carry out a rebellion in 15 days and had secretly controlled 170,000 troops in Sichuan. Xiu realized that in 15 days it would be Ning's birthday, meaning that when Ning celebrated her 18th birthday, Mr. Yang would carry out a rebellion. Kadan and the troops of the northern clan were imprisoned. Kadan asked the prison guard to call a doctor because one of her troops was seriously ill, but the guard was reluctant to help and looked down on her. Kadan even lowered her pride as a royal princess to ask for help, but still the guard ignored her. Knowing there was no hope in asking for help, Kadan took a knife, heated it on fire, and then stopped the bleeding on her troop. Not long after that, Yin approached the prison warden while scolding him because of his attitude towards Kadan. After that, he asked all the wardens to bring the injured enemy troops for treatment. In short, a messenger from the northern clan arrived. Yin Xing asked the northern clan not to attack the border city again. Initially, the messenger did not agree. The reason they had been attacking the border city was that they wanted to seize the city as their territory. But Yin Xing said that if they didn't agree, then the princess of the northern clan, who was currently held hostage, would not be released. Listening to this, the messenger immediately fell silent. He asked for time because soon the general of the North clan would come. Not long after, General Lu Dai arrived. The reason he was late was that he got lost on the road when entering the capital. He immediately offended the Sichuan kingdom by inviting Yin Xing to fight with him in exchange for him to comply with everything Yin Xing wanted. When the fight was about to take place, Yin Xing trapped Xiu to take his place in the fight. He even deliberately badmouthed Lu Dai, who was deemed to be no match for Xiu. Hearing this, Lu Dai became angry and challenged Xiu to fight against him. Xiu couldn't back but to accept the duel. The fight was quite simple. Whoever managed to hit the opponent's drum would be the winner. During the fight, it was clear that Xiu was superior, but he was not serious, even deliberately playing with Lu Dai to offend him. Lu Dai attacked blindly without realizing that he destroyed his own drum and lost the fight. Long story short, the meeting was held again. Lu Dai said that the northern clan was willing to make peace and would not attack the border city again, but on one condition. He wanted to see their princess. Yin Xing said that he would return their princess the next day, but the two kingdoms had to sign a letter of peace. Meanwhile, Lu announced the result that the two kingdoms had agreed to make peace, and the next day, the princess would be returned. Hearing that, Mr. Yang had an idea to kill Kadan. If she was killed, the peace agreement would be destroyed, and the northern clan would definitely declare war. Yin Xing, who was responsible for this problem, would definitely be blamed. Somewhere else, Xiu was approached by Yin Xing. He knew that Mr. Yang secretly wanted to thwart the peace, so Xiu was asked to look after the safety of Kadan, so because the success of this peace concerned the future of the border city. Xiu then asked Lin to look after Kadan because he was capable of doing so. Sai Yilin was willing to carry out the order and then approach Kadan in prison. For the time being, Kadan would be taken to Sai Yilin's residence so that she remained safe, and the next day she would be returned to the Northern Clan as a condition of the peace agreement. Kadan then put Shu's clothes on to trick the prison guard, and Sai Yilin immediately took her away. The one who replaced Kadan in prison was Siu. When arrived at their destination, Sai Yilin gave her a special room. He also gave her a bell she could use to ask for help. Moments later, Kadan saw a feather in one of the lanterns there. Meanwhile, Bai Chuan came to prison on the pretext of wanting to deliver food for Kadan. After entering, it turned out that Siu deliberately called her to replace him in prison, disguised as Kadan. Sai Yilin was very surprised to see Kadan had disappeared from her room. It turned out that Kadan had secretly met the troops of the northern tribe. The troops there said that Kadan would be delivered to meet the messenger and General Lu Dai. Kadan asked about his father and brothers, and the guard answered that the king and princes were fine. Meanwhile, Sai Yilin received information from the gate guard that there was a horse-drawn carriage passed by earlier. Hearing that, he immediately went after it. Kadan, on the other hand, began to realize that she had been taken out of the capital while the messenger and General Lu Dai were still in there. She suspected that these two troops were intended to kill her. The two troops finally said that they had been ordered by Kadan's first brother to kill her to thwart peace. Kadan could only remain silent and didn't expect her brother to have the heart to do this to her. She then asked for a knife and would commit suicide if her life was really needed for the Northern Clan. The troops then gave her a knife. Luckily, Sai Yilin arrived just in time to help, but suddenly another horseman came to attack them. Sai Yilin sacrificed himself to shield the arrow and immediately took Kadan away. The next day, Shu looked for Sai Yilin's whereabouts. One of the servants said that Sai Yilin went looking for Kadan, who disappeared last night but hadn't come back. Meanwhile, Kadan and Sai Yilin entered a cave to hide. Sai Yilin took off his robe and gave it to Kadan to keep her warm. Receiving such care made Kadan begin to fall in love with him. Meanwhile, another meeting was held. The Northern Clan messenger and Lu Dai were waiting, but Kadan had not yet appeared. Shu came and asked Yin Xing about the problems that were happening at the moment. Listening to that, Yin Xing started to panic, afraid of what would happen to Kadan. Su then showed an item found in Kadan's room, and Yin Xing realized that the Northern Clan had kidnapped Kadan to thwart peace between the two kingdoms. Su was asked to disguise herself in place of Kadan, so as not to arouse suspicion while they waited for news from Sai Yilin. After that, Yin Xing came back to say that Kadan would arrive soon. Listening to that, Lu Dai immediately went out, while the messenger was stopped by Yin Xing and invited him to chat for a while. Short story, it was reported that Kadan was currently suffering from an illness. Lu Dai, who wanted to approach her, was prohibited by Yin Xing because the disease was contagious. It wasn't clear what Yin Xing told the messenger earlier, but suddenly, the messenger also stopped Lu Dai from going near the carriage. The messenger approached the carriage and looked inside to see Su disguised himself as Kadan, but strangely, the messenger didn't say anything about it and instead asked to send the princess straight to their kingdom. Lu Dai began suspecting the strange attitude shown by the messenger. He then ordered his men to find out who the person on the carriage was. It turned out that Yin Xing told the messenger that Kadan had disappeared last night, so he asked the messenger to pretend and promised that he would find her in a day. On the other hand, Lu Dai turned out to be someone sent by the first prince of the Northern Clan to kill Kadan so that peace between the two kingdoms could be thwarted. Lu Dai also found out that it wasn't Kadan who was in the carriage. Meanwhile, the troops were still searching for Sai Yilin and Kadan's whereabouts. The troops turned out to be sent by Mr. Yang. From the start, Mr. Yang knew that Lu Dai had the task of killing Kadan, and since they had the same goal, namely thwarting the peace of the two kingdoms, Mr. Yang was willing to assist Lu Dai. After that, Mr. Yang summoned Siu to keep him from looking for Kadan. He ordered Siu to help him paint a picture because he was great at it. Lin was ordered to accompany Siu while painting. While they were in that room, the two of them chatted. Shu told about Ka Dan's disappearance and that Sai Lilan had gone looking for her but had not returned yet. Meanwhile, Ka Dan and Sai Lilan were still hiding. Ka Dan was asked to rest while Sai Lilan went to stand guard. While he was on guard, he suddenly fainted and fell. Ka Dan then tried to save him. At the same time, Shu managed to escape from Mr. Yang's residence and started searching while Lin pretended to look after Xiu, who was still painting. He realized that his movements were being watched by one of Mr. Yang's servants from outside. At the same time, Ka Dan and Sai Lilan were still hiding. Ka Dan, who had expertise in medicine, immediately lit a fire and burned a knife. She took out the poison from the wound on Sai Lilan's body and closed the wound. Meanwhile, Lin was almost caught lying because one of Mr. Yang's servants wanted to deliver food to Xiu. He tried to stop him from coming in, and the man seemed to be suspicious of him. Luckily, Xiu came on time and pretended to start a fight with Lin to show that the two of them hated each other. Short story, Sai Lilan has woken up from fainting. Ka Dan said that the arrow he shielded before received contained poison, which caused him to faint. Luckily, she managed to get the poison out of his body. Listening to this, Sai Lilan thanked her. Ka Dan then told him that her first brother sent General Lu Di and the troops of the Northern Clan to kill her so that the two kingdoms would not make peace. Not only she was a hostage for the Sichuan kingdom, but she was also the target of assassination for her own kingdom. Sai Lilan felt sorry for her and promised that after returning to the capital, he would ask Xiu for help so that Ka Dan could find a place to stay for a while. On the other hand, Xiu failed to find Sai Lilan and Ka Dan's whereabouts, and he had to immediately leave there. Lin had an idea. He went to the supervisory department office where Xiu was currently working and destroyed the office. Coincidentally, Xiu's 3 servants were there and saw it, but they didn't want to interfere and chose to remain silent. At the same time, Lu was sent by Mr. Yang to meet General Lu Di to discuss a plan to thwart the peace. Lu Di was sure that the Ka Dan had finally been killed and their mission had been successful, not knowing that Ka Dan was still alive. Lin told Xiu that he had destroyed the supervisory department's office room. Not long afterward, Xiu was called by the leader of the supervisory department. He was dragged to immediately clean up the office. Mr. Yang couldn't do anything but let him leave. After returning, Xiu saw that his office had been destroyed, but thanks to that, he was able to get out of the residence of Mr. Yang. Unfortunately, he had to pay for things that had been damaged. Ning came to help and was willing to give her money as long as Xiu came back to her house, and because he didn't have the money, Xiu accepted the help. Meanwhile, Mr. Yang gave Lin a box containing the princess's item. The box had to be handed over to the messenger from the Northern Clan. Mr. Yang frankly said that he had collaborated with General Lu Di so that the two kingdoms failed to make peace, so he could stage a rebellion and take over the position of king in the Sichuan kingdom. Not only that, he also gave Lin the best sword he had because Lin was his only trusted person who would help him carry out a rebellion. Lin received the sword while continuing to act as if he was siding with Mr. Yang. Meanwhile, Sai Lilan was fighting against troops who had been chasing him since yesterday. Luckily, Shu managed to find him and immediately helped finish off the troops. The messenger from the Northern Clan received the box containing the item that belonged to Ka Dan. Lu Di frankly said that he had received orders from the first prince to kill Ka Dan so that he could thwart the peace. Hearing this, the messenger of course became angry. However, because he didn't have power, he couldn't do anything. The next day, Yin Xing waited for Lu Di to come to the meeting room because Ka Dan had been found and he wanted to return it to the Northern Clan, but after waiting a long time, the messenger and Lu Di had not arrived. Yin Xing then got a report that the messenger and Lu Di had left the Sichuan kingdom last night. Not only that, there was a letter left which stated that the Northern Clan refused to make peace because Ka Dan had died. Sai Lilan apologized for failing to bring Ka Dan back to the capital on time, but he made sure that Ka Dan was alright. Yin Xing realized the Northern Clan intended to kill Ka Dan to thwart peace, and Mr. Yang was the one who helped in this assassination mission. Therefore, they had to put Kadan in a safer place and keep her whereabouts a secret. A meeting was held. The king, all the ministers, and generals of the Sichuan kingdom were presented to discuss the issue of peace, which failed to be achieved. Sooner or later, the northern clan would attack the border city again, so it was decided that Yin Xing would return to the border city, because after all, he was the commander of the troops there. Lin asked for permission to go to the border city to help Yin Xing face the troops of the northern clan, and brought some of Mr. Yang's troops to the border city. The king agreed to the decision, knowing they all definitely chose the best decision for the kingdom. Xu, Lin, and Sci Weiland met again. It turned out that the reason Lin wanted to go to the border town was that he wanted to bring some troops from the capital, so that the rebellion that would be carried out by Mr. Yang would have fewer troops. Meanwhile, Yin Xing approached Mr. Yang to chat before he returned to the border city. It turned out that the previous king was Yin Xing, and Mr. Yang was 3 adopted brothers who built the Sichuan kingdom. Yin Xing already knew that Mr. Yang wanted to revolt because he didn't accept that he wasn't appointed as the new king, but instead the previous king's younger brother. This was the reason Yin Xing came, to make him realize that what he had done was wrong. He didn't have to be the king to protect the kingdom. This was the reason why the previous king didn't choose him as his successor, because Mr. Yang was cunning and authoritarian. Before his departure to the border city, Lin said goodbye to his wife. She could only hope that her husband would return to the capital safely. Short story, Kadan stayed at Ning's residence for a while. Ning saw that Kadan was holding a knife and thought that Kadan was going to commit suicide, so she immediately went inside to stop her. However, it turned out that it was just a misunderstanding. Kadan had no intention of committing suicide, but wanted to carve a sculpture that she would later send to her father to tell him that she was still alive. Seeing that, Ning became embarrassed and felt guilty. Ning tried to get to know her better so she could be friends with her. Not only that, in the evening, the two had fun together. For a moment, Kadan could forget about her problems. After that, Kadan gave her the wooden carving she had just made and asked Ning to hand over the wooden carving to the troops who were going to the border city. Ning immediately went to meet the king and showed the wooden carving. After seeing that, the king finally found out that Kadan was still alive. The king then ordered the servant there to chase Yin Xing, who had left because only Yin Xing could deliver the wooden carvings to the northern clan. When returned home, Ning was already neatly dressed because she and Xiu had promised to play music together, but unfortunately, Xiu forgot about this and instead was about to leave. This made Ning very angry because all this time, Xiu seemed to avoid her even though they hadn't seen each other for 7 years. A fight broke out between the two of them. Xiu felt guilty and asked her to play music together, but Ning who didn't want to see him anymore and threw him out of there. Xiu then went outside to sit alone, remembering his childhood with Ning while playing music together. The next day, Mr. Yang, who got information from Lu that Kadan was still alive and was at Princess Ning's residence, no longer cared about Kadan. Yin Xing had gone to the border city with his troops while the king was busy taking care of the government. It was time for them to carry out a rebellion to take advantage of Princess Ning's birthday, which was soon to be held. In the evening, the king invited Xiu to eat together. It was clear that Ning was still angry with him, and the king realized that. Feeling that the situation was not conducive, Xiu chose to leave. The king immediately stopped him and asked the two of them to make up. Ning refused to make up because Xiu always forgot the promises they made and seemed to avoid her. Xiu tried to apologize, but Ning just left him. When returned home, Xiu thought about his relationship with Ning. Sci Yilin then came and invited him to investigate Mr. Yang because Sci Weiland started to be suspicious of where Mr. Yang got the materials for making the swords all this time. Short story, Xiu took Sci Yilin to the brothel to meet the owner so that they could get the information they needed at this time. Unfortunately, the news about Xiu going to the brothel reached Ning's ears. As a result, she became even more angry and misunderstood because she thought that Xiu had gone to see some women. Finally, Xiu and Sci Yilin got information from the brothel owner that Mr. Yang had been digging a mining cave that contained meteorite iron, which was definitely an illegal act. They had to immediately investigate to find the location of the mine. The next day, Xiu succeeded in intercepting Mr. Yang's man, who was carrying meteorites from the mine. A fight broke out, but in the end, the mask covering Xiu's face was dropped. He didn't want any witnesses, so he killed the man on the spot and took the stamp in the man's pocket. Soon, Scifi found the whereabouts of the mine and immediately destroyed it. After that, Xiu wrote a fake message in the name of Mr. Yang using the stamp and asked Bai Chuan to send the letter to the border city. The contents of the letter told some of Mr. Yang's troops that Lin had brought to the border city not to return to the capital. This way, Xiu managed to reduce the troops in the capital. After that, Xiu went to meet Ning to resolve the problem between the two of them. He tried to apologize to her, but because she was drunk all night, Ning fell into his arms and then cried while hugging him. She asked if he still loved her. For the past 7 years, she always missed him and waited for his return. While crying, she climbed onto the bed and fell asleep there. Xiu hated himself for being a coward and always disappointing her. After returning to the capital, he was actually happy to be able to meet Ning again, but the circumstances made him have to act maturely and prioritize the problems of the kingdom. As long as Mr. Yang was still there, they would not be able to live calmly. In the evening, Mr. Yang received information that the man who was carrying meteorite iron had been killed. Not only that, the mine was also destroyed and the culprit was still unknown. Hearing that, he was so shocked and ordered his men to investigate who the perpetrator was. After that, he went to the grave of the previous king. He was angry and disappointed because the king handed over the position of king to his brother, even though the previous king, together with himself and Yin Xing, was the one who built the kingdom together. Because of this, Mr. Yang did not accept this fact and would do anything to seize the position of king. He believed that if he was the one who led the kingdom, it would advance rapidly and be feared by other kingdoms. Mr. Yang then buried a book of smithing which he had been keeping all this time. He had made many swords that would be used in the rebellion. He didn't need the book anymore. Meanwhile, Xiu met the brothel owner and asked for help to teach Ning to play the zither. Currently, he and Ning were fighting, and this was the only way to make amends for his mistake, namely to teach Ning to play the zither correctly. He had to explain the misunderstanding because Ning had always suspected that he had gone to the brothel to see women even though he never did that. The brothel owner was willing to help him. Ning asked Scifi to accompany Kadan to fly the lanterns as a form of prayer ceremony for her deceased mother. Scifi agreed to accompany her. The two of them went to the center of the city. Kadan then flew the lantern while sending prayers for her mother. Scifi tried to cheer her up so that she wouldn't be sad anymore. Upon returning, Scifi told Xiu that he liked Kadan, even though he knew it was impossible for him to be with her, considering that Kadan was the princess of an enemy kingdom, while he was a general from the Sichuan kingdom. Therefore, he chose to keep his feelings to himself. Xiu forced him to express his feelings before it was too late, because if Kadan returned to her kingdom, Scifi would regret it, but Scifi still didn't dare to do that. Long story short, Xiu and Ning started playing music together. It turned out Ning wasn't very good at playing the zither to the point that the maid there covered her ears, because the music played by Ning wasn't pleasant to hear. The reason Xiu always refused to play music with her was because of that, and unfortunately, Ning didn't realize that she was not good at playing the instrument and instead considered herself good at it. Somewhere else, Mr. Yang was approached by Lu, who gave information that the one who destroyed their mine was Scifi. Mr. Yang realized that the king dared to fight him, and that was a sign of war for him. Since the rebellion had been discovered, they didn't need to cover it up anymore. Meanwhile, Xiu brought the brothel owner to teach Ning how to play the zither. After seeing that the brothel owner was good at playing the zither, Ming felt jealous. She went inside and cried because she had just realized that all this time she had not been good at playing it. That was why Xiu brought the woman to teach her. Xiu tried to calm her down and asked her to learn it so that later, on her birthday, they could play music together. Ning went back to practicing and the woman taught her very hard while Xiu waited downstairs. After a while, he went upstairs to see, and Ning was finally able to play the instrument better. Meanwhile, Mr. Yang with Mr. Xiao was at the blacksmith and found that the shop owner had died. The servant in the shop said that Sai Weilin often came to their shop. The servant then met Sai Weilin to report that the blacksmith in the capital had died mysteriously. At this time, Sai Weilin would be taken for interrogation. He was asked about his closeness to the owner of a blacksmith shop in the capital. He admitted that he was very close and often came there to repair his sword. He was suspected of being the perpetrator of the murder, and of course, he denied it. He was asked where he was at the night 2 days ago, and Sai Weilin couldn't answer because, after all, that night he was with Kay-Dan flying a lantern, and he couldn't spill her whereabouts. Because he didn't want to answer, he was put in prison and suspected of being the murderer. Si went to prison after finding out that Sai Weilin was accused of being the murderer. Sai Weilin's whole body was covered in wounds after being tortured. He realized that Mr. Yang and Mr. Xiao had worked together to frame him. This way, he couldn't be by the king's side. It was possible that Mr. Yang would soon stage a rebellion. Siu immediately met Kay-Dan and Ning and told them about the matter. Kay-Dan said that at night 2 days ago, Sai Weilin and her were flying a lantern in the middle of the city. He couldn't be the perpetrator of the murder. Kay-Dan then agreed to be a witness to be able to release Sai Weilin from prison, but Siu forbade this because this was a trap for Mr. Yang. Even though Kay-Dan came as a witness, it was certain that Mr. Yang would make new accusations as if Sai Weilin had collaborated with the Northern Clan because he helped protect Kay-Dan. He asked them both to calm down because he had an idea. A man sent by Siu came to the prison and lied to the prison guard that he was a new guard assigned to torture Sai Weilin. At first, the prison guard didn't believe it, but when he saw the man using acupuncture techniques to torture Sai Weilin and even make him paralyzed, he believed in him. Long story short, the king came and was very surprised to see that Sai Weilin's hands and feet had become paralyzed. The king suddenly fell ill and asked Mr. Yang to let Sai Weilin go. Since it was a request from the king, Mr. Yang was willing to let him out of prison. Kay-Dan was sad to see Sai Weilin's condition. She couldn't hold back her tears. In another place, Lin met his wife after returning from the border city. His wife was happy to be able to see him return safely. The next day, the long-awaited day of the rebellion on Princess Ning's birthday would be carried out. The party was held and everyone gathered to celebrate, because Ning was also going to have a coming-of-age ceremony. But when the ceremony was going to be held, the king had not yet arrived, so Lu asked Mr. Yang to replace the king to lead the ceremony. Mr. Yang sat in the king's chair while opening a box containing a crown for Ning. Suddenly, the king came and apologized for being late because he was sick. After seeing Mr. Yang sitting in his place, he handed over the task of the ceremony to be carried out by Mr. Yang. He then left there. One of the generals did not agree that Mr. Yang took the king's place in the ceremony. Lin immediately killed him to show that was siding with Mr. Yang. A commotion started to occur, and Siu ordered his men to prepare a carriage and took Ning away from there. He then explained to Ning that Mr. Yang would stage a rebellion in the night. She was told to stay inside her room with Kay-Dan and was given a knife to defend herself. At the palace, all guests and several ministers had been killed, and the place was in ruins. Mr. Yang said that he would kill everyone that opposed him. All that remained was to finish off the troops who were against him. Then after that, killed the king. He asked Lu to convey a message to Lei Hong, the commander of the troops in the kingdom, to prepare the troops to carry out a massacre. Meanwhile, Siu and Lin intend to kill Lei Hong, so that all the troops in the kingdom would not dare to act, even if it is Mr. Yang who gives the order. Not long after that, Sai Weilin arrived there in good condition. It turned out that the man who was sent to torture Sai Weilin was pretending to make him paralyzed. Finally, the three of them gathered, and they would be able to finish off Mr. Yang and all his henchmen. Yan Xing received information that Mr. Yang had carried out a rebellion that night. He didn't have time to return to the capital because he was still in the border city. Suddenly, his own subordinate launched an arrow that went straight to his chest and killed him. He died honorably because he continued to maintain his position so that it remained strong. Meanwhile, Lin met Lei Hong, the commander of the troops. He pretended to be on behalf of Mr. Yang and brought a gift for him. When Lei Hong opened it, the contents were empty, and from behind, Xiu and Cai Yilin, who was disguised as a soldier, immediately killed him on the spot and put him inside the box. Lei Hong's troops were ready to wait for order. The three generals there felt strange because Lei Hong hadn't given the order at all. Not long after, Xiu came and gave wine and food. He also showed Lei Hong's jade ring and ordered them not to take any action unless he gave the order. One of the generals denied his order and was about to meet Lei Hong, but suddenly, Bai Chun and her troops came. The general, who was about to leave, immediately called his troops. Didn't want any fight. Xiu revealed that he had killed Lei Hong. Mr. Yang was currently planning to rebel, and if they all helped him, they would be labeled as rebels. As long as they remained there and didn't do anything, Xiu promised to provide safety for all of them. Hearing this, the three generals finally agreed to follow his orders. At the same time, Mr. Yang ordered Lu to give orders to Lei Hong to mobilize all the troops to carry out a massacre, while at the king's residence, Cai Yilin and his troops were fighting against the troops belonging to Mr. Yang, who wanted to kill the king. Not long after that, Bai Chun came to help Cai Yilin. After that, she gave an item from Xiu to him and asked him to go to Mr. Xiao's residence. Cai Yilin immediately met Mr. Xiao and gave him an item from Xiu, which turned out to contain a letter. When he read it, the contents said that Mr. Xiao must die. Seeing that, he was scared. Somewhere else, Lin brought the troops that were ordered by Mr. Yang to carry out a massacre, but then he saw signs of fireworks from Xiu, which indicated that Lei Hong's troops had been successfully controlled by him. Seeing that, Lin ordered the troops to blow a trumpet to give a sign. Mr. Yang heard the sound of the trumpet and thought Lin had entered the capital to carry out a massacre, even though Lin had not done anything. Short story, Mr. Yang came to the king's residence with some of his troops. Not long after that, Cai Yilin came there, making Mr. Yang very surprised to see that he was fine. There Mr. Yang was confident because he had 170,000 troops behind him would definitely be able to defeat Cai Yilin, who only had 20,000 troops. Not long afterward, Lu came to report that Xiu had killed Lei Hong and taken over the troops, but he had succeeded in taking over the troops back. Hearing that, Mr. Yang ordered him to bring the troops to carry out an attack, but Lu suddenly refused his order. The king then came and revealed that he had been pretending to be weak and useless, but in reality, he had prepared a plan against Mr. Yang, one of which was that Lu was his confidant whom he ordered to be on Mr. Yang's side for the last 7 years. Not only that, the king also said that Lin was also his confidant, whom he put on Mr. Yang's side too. Mr. Yang was very surprised and couldn't believe that. In the end, he was executed. The three generals felt afraid that they would also be executed because they were labeled as rebels. Xiu had promised to protect the three of them, and they also didn't take any action. Therefore, Xiu told them to stay calm. Meanwhile, Mr. Xiao intended to leave because he had helped Mr. Yang to carry out a rebellion, but suddenly he was killed by one of the king's troops. His body was dragged away using a horse. Lin then mobilized all his troops to finish off Mr. Yang's minions. He then went to Xiu. Xiu explained that Lei Hong's troops who were with him did not take any action, and they didn't need to be executed. However, Lin had decided to kill all of Mr. Yang's minions without exception. A debate broke out between the two of them. Xiu continued to persuade him, because after all, he had promised all the troops there that he would protect them. Lin then told him to meet the king first, and if Xiu got approval from the king, then he wouldn't kill Lei Hong's troops. Xiu immediately went to the king and asked to give orders for Lin to withdraw his troops. He also told the king about the problems that were happening. The king was initially angry if Xiu continued to protect Lei Hong's troops, but Xiu insisted that he wanted to protect the troops because he had promised them. Moreover, the troops did not take any action and were with him all night. He just didn't want any troops to die in vain. Seeing him being stubborn like that, the king then gave him the order plaque. After he managed to get the plaque, Xiu immediately returned to show it to Lin, only to find Lin had killed the 3 generals and all of Lei Hong's troops without hesitation. Xiu could only remain silent. The next day, Lu informed the king that all the traitors and Mr. Yang's henchmen had been killed. The capital was clean. He also asked for permission to go home, because he had not seen his family for 7 years. The king gave permission, but an unexpected thing happened. Lu found his entire family murdered. He was devastated and suspected this was Lin's work. At the same time, Xiu received information from Bai Chuan that his teacher, Yin Xing, had been killed in the border city. Xiu collapsed after hearing the bad news. Meanwhile, Lu asked the king for justice because his family was killed by Lin. Listening to that, the king felt guilty because he forgot to tell Lin that Lu was his trusted person disguised as Mr. Yang's loyal servant. Lu then asked to be executed because it was useless for him to live at this time. The king then slapped him because he was his trusted person. For this problem, he would find a solution because he couldn't possibly punish Lin for this incident, since Lin was also one of his trusted people. Long story short, Yin Xing's funeral was held. Everyone was devastated by his death. The king would make a special grade for Yin Xing next to the previous king. Not long after that, Lu came to pay his respects. The king then announced to everyone that Lu was his accomplice who was assigned to be on Mr. Yang's side, just like Lin. Lu suddenly accused Lin of killing Yin Xing. He did this out of anger because Lin had killed his family. Lin of course didn't admit it, and it was impossible for him to kill Yin Xing. The problem with Lu's family was indeed his mistake, and he accepted the punishment for the problem. In short, Xu and Cai Yuelin visited Lin in prison. Since Lin couldn't go, he asked for help from both of them to investigate who killed Yin Xing. Xiu was seen waiting outside because he was still angry with Lin due to what happened last night. Xiu and Cai Yuelin left there to immediately carry out an investigation. Blood then came out of Lin's arms. Xiu and Cai Yuelin realized that Lin had been tortured. Xiu received information that there were troops belonging to Mr. Yang who survived and were outside the capital. He immediately went to the hideout of these troops. After arriving, he immediately finished off the troops belonging to Mr. Yang, but before he could interrogate them, the troops decided to commit suicide. Yin Xing's loyal troops were seriously injured and dying. Before he died, he said that it was not Mr. Yang who killed Yin Xing, but it was an order from the king because the king wanted to control the capital of the Sichuan kingdom and the border city. Hearing that made Xiu very surprised. With revenge building in his heart, he brought a sword to meet the king. He wanted to say that he already knew that the person who ordered someone to kill Yin Xing was the king, but he didn't dare to say that because he was still thinking about the future of the kingdom. If everyone found out that Yin Xing had been killed by the kingdom would collapse. Finally, he chose to remain silent and asked the king to send him back to the border city, but the king didn't want him to leave the capital. After that, the king called his eunuch and ordered Lin to be taken out of prison. Then he sat down because he realized Xiu seemed to have known that he was the one who killed Yin Xing. For a moment, he saw the shadow of the previous king and he called him brother. The king gave a gift in the form of a position to each fighter who succeeded in eradicating the rebels. Cai Yuelin was appointed general of the Sichuan royal army, while Lu was appointed military minister of the kingdom, replacing Mr. Yang. Lin, on the other hand, was appointed the minister of court, replacing Mr. Xiao. Each official in the kingdom also received gifts, but strangely only Xiu did not get anything. This was done by the king because the king began to realize that Xiu already knew that he was the one who arranged Yin Xing. Meanwhile, Xiu was at his residence. He already knew that he did not get a gift from the king. His 3 servants took the initiative to collect money so that they could build a new division in the kingdom. Unfortunately, the 3 of them did not have enough money. The next day, Xiu and his servants went to a remote village to stay away from the capital. Not long afterward, Ning came over to him. She was angry because he moved and left the center of the capital. Ning asked him to come back, but Xiu refused. When she asked the reason he moved, Xiu didn't tell her a thing and chose to keep the matter of Yin Xing's death a secret because he didn't want her to fight with the king, her uncle. Ming felt that Siu left to avoid her, and she felt disappointed. After Ning left, Bai Chun came and asked why he didn't tell the truth to Ning. Siu answered that it was better that Ning didn't know the truth since it would only cause problems. At the same time, the king was having a conversation with Lin. He asked Lin to avoid Siu, afraid that she would brainwash him. He also asked for his opinion if she was moved to the border city. Hearing this, Lin disagreed and said that it would be better for Siu to remain in the capital. He asked why the king did not give a gift to Siu, but the king did not answer and chose to leave. After that, Lin told Sai Lilan about the king's suspicious behavior. He suspected that the king seemed to want to get rid of Siu, so he asked Sai Lilan to convey a message to Siu to be careful. Sai Lilan then met with Siu to convey the message. Siu was still reluctant to meet Lin due to the last incident. Sai Lilan became a means of communication between the two, which made him irritated because he had to go back and forth just to deliver messages to both. He asked the two of them to meet each other and chat instead of being like this. Meanwhile, General Lei, the one who killed Yin Xing, was in the border city, running away from Siu, who was seeking revenge for Yin Xing's death, even though General Lei did this as orders from the king, and he still had to keep the secret. Long story short, the king panicked when he heard from Lu that the rebel troops led by General Lei were in the border town. At first, he didn't give any orders, but suddenly, Sai Lilan asked permission to go to the border city in pursuit of General Lei to be killed. The king couldn't do anything but give permission. Before leaving, Sai Lilan met Kadan and gave her gifts. He didn't know when he would return because he had a duty to go to the border city to hunt down the rebels who were still alive. After giving Kadan the gift, Sai Lilan immediately left shyly. His attitude made Kadan like him even more. Meanwhile, Siu gathered everyone in the village to recruit his own private army, but unfortunately, the youths in the village had gone to become bandits so they could earn money. Hearing that, Siu had an idea to forcefully attract the youth in the village to be his army. The news about Siu wanting to recruit young men had spread. They all thought Siu was a general from the capital who wanted to force them to fight, and of course, they rejected this because they were afraid of death. In short, Siu took all the parents and children to look for the bandits. The bandits saw Siu came and prepared to attack, but they stopped after seeing that Siu was taking their parents and children. Siu planned to trick these young people into coming out of their hiding. In the end, they were taken back to the village by force. After returning to the village, Siu recruited these young men to become his army and promised them a prosperous life. Not only that, their parents would also be given proper compensation. After saying that, the youth reluctantly joined. Finally, Siu succeeded in recruiting his own army. In short, the king was approached by a female soldier named King who had just returned from out of town. It turned out that King was his adopted daughter, who had been sent out of town to avoid the war against the rebellious Mr. Yang. After the kingdom calmed down, the king called her to come home. He intended to match her with Sai Lilan, because they were both considered like his own children. Hearing that, King blushed. Meanwhile, at the border city, Sai Lilan managed to kill the rebel troop, but he failed to catch General Lei, who had run away. Not long after, Sai Lilan received a message from the king ordering him to return to the capital. Seeing the letter, Sai Lilan was reluctant to return and instead continued to pursue General Lei. He began to suspect the king was hiding a secret from him. Siu was approached by one of the female troops from the border town, and she handed over a box left by her teacher Yin Xing and asked him to find the owner of the box. According to the story, the box belonged to King Ming, the strongest warrior in the world. Even his name was considered a legend. Bai Chuan felt strange, because if King Ming was still alive, that meant he was already 300 years old, and it was impossible for a human being to live that long. After that, Siu met Lin. The two had made up after the clash before. Chu told Lin about the box. Lin then said that he was suspicious of the king's actions of giving everyone but Siu a gift, and asked what was going on between Siu and the king. Siu chose to remain silent and not talk about Yin Xing's death. He was eager to return to the border city with the troops he had formed. However, unfortunately, the king still did not allow him to leave the capital. In the meantime, Lu received information that the king told Sci Yilan to return, but Sci Yilan refused and went after General Lei, the only surviving rebel force. Because of this, Lu became very angry because Sci Yilan did not obey the king's orders. He, who was now the military minister, would punish him after he returned to the capital. Later, Ning asked the king to marry her to Xiu because he was in love with him, but the king suddenly became furious. He, who initially agreed with Ning's relationship with Xiu, had now opposed it. He said that Ning didn't deserve to marry Xiu, who was only a general and didn't have any position in the kingdom, while she was the successor of the kingdom. Still, Ning forced his uncle to approve of her marriage, but unfortunately, the king refused and left her. After that, the king sent his accomplices to send Xiu away to the border city, leaving the capital clear. What he was doing was out of fear, because Xiu was the only person who knew he was the mastermind behind the murder of Yin Xing. On the other hand, Su, who knew the king would send him to the border city, of course, was very happy because that was his wish from the start. He told his 3 servants to prepare, and they would leave immediately. It turned out that Xiu's reason for wanting to return to the border was none other than so that he could freely search for General Lei's whereabouts to avenge his teacher's death. After that, he went to meet Ning and had a long chat with her. He made Ning laugh happily with his jokes. After doing all that, he honestly said that he was going to the border. He didn't know when he would come back, and maybe he would never come back, so he asked Ning to look for someone else because he felt he was not worthy of her. Obviously, his words made Ning very disappointed, and she kicked him out of there. After leaving, Xiu apologized. He deliberately hurt her heart so that Ning could forget him. Meanwhile, Sci Yilan and his troops had been chasing for 2 months to capture General Lei. They had to survive because the king had not sent the stock of food, because from the start, Sci Yilan was asked to return, but he refused. Therefore, the king didn't send the stock of food. Luckily, his troops were very loyal and supported Sci Yilan's decision, even though they had to forage to eat, relying on plants or vegetables in the forest. A few days later, Dan found Ning disguised as a servant and wanted to go to the border after Xiu. She clearly forbade her because the border was prone to war, plus the residents were hit by poverty and hunger. Many criminals were lurking there. Still, Ming was stubborn. She had made up her mind to follow Xiu, so she could be with the person she loved. Because of this, Dan couldn't stop her and would help her escape from the capital so that the king wouldn't find out. Ning was then disguised as a merchant so she could leave. In short, Xiu and his troops had arrived at the border town. He received a report that the generals in the border town didn't want to share food with him. Hearing this, he became very angry, so he went to the general there to scold him because he dared not share food with him and his troops. The general argued that Xiu's troops were like bandits, who did not deserve to be in the border city. His words made Xiu become very angry and ordered his troops to beat them all, resulting in a commotion. It turned out that what Xiu did was not only for his personal interests. He cooked a lot of food and distributed it to residents in need because they were hit by starvation as a result of being victims of war. At night, Ming had arrived at the border town and rented a room in an inn. She gave a lot of money because it was her first time leaving the capital. The owner of the inn was, of course, very happy and gave her the best room. Coincidentally, the troops belonging to Xiu were there drinking wine. They were involved in a fight with local thugs who were also drinking, but because they were outnumbered, one of them accidentally fired the fireworks that were meant for summoning troops in the border city, and shortly after, Xiu came there and the thugs were frightened. At the capital, Lin's wife asked where Ning was. She had not come home for 3 days. One of the maids lied that Ning had gone home and shut herself in the room because she was sick. Then the king came shortly after and forced his way into the room to meet Ning, but in the end, it was revealed that Ning was not in the room. The maid also admitted that Ning had been going to the temple for several days. Luckily, the king believed. Lin's wife asked Dan to tell her the truth. Dan finally said that Ning went to the border town following Xiu. When she heard this, she was shocked until she fainted on the spot. After she woke up, she immediately told the matter to her husband. They must immediately tell Xiu about this matter, afraid that something bad might happen to Ning during the journey. Lin immediately sent a letter to Xiu. Meanwhile, Siu received information that General Lei hadn't gone far from the border city. He immediately ordered his troops to prepare, and they would go there to capture General Lei. On the other hand, Ning was lost. She didn't know where she was. She saw a remote village and stopped there. A very kind old woman gave her food and drink, although only modestly. After knowing that the people in the village were victims of the war, she felt sorry for them and gave her bracelet to the old woman to sell so that they could buy better food to survive. The old woman was very happy and told the villagers about it. At night, Ning woke up wondering why she was able to sleep until late at night. The old woman then came and asked her to eat together. At first, she didn't feel the slightest suspicion and ate together, but after she left, she realized that her horse had been killed and used as food. She was very angry. After running away from there, Ning accidentally met someone and fainted due to fear. Meanwhile, Shu finally got news about Ning going to the border city alone, and her whereabouts were not yet known. Of course, this made him very surprised, and he immediately went to look for her. He went to the last inn Ning was. The owner of the inn said Ning went north. Hearing that, he realized that the north direction was the direction where General Lei hid, so he hurried away. Meanwhile, Ning was kidnapped by the young man who found her. She was scared because she thought she would be killed and eaten by them. She quickly untied herself and ran away as far as possible. Luckily, during her escape, Siu managed to find her. Ning immediately hugged him because she was scared to death. Meanwhile, at night, Chu's troops managed to arrive at their destination. They were afraid because the place was eerie. One of the troops was told to go forward to check the situation. The local people there then came to surround them. Luckily, Siu arrived on time because he knew the locals. They were very happy to be able to meet again. Because of this, Siu's troops, who were initially scared to death, could breathe a sigh of relief. They then drank together while Siu introduced Ning to the tribe leader. It was explained that the people who had captured Ning previously had no intention of harming her, but rather helped her and even treated her sprained leg. The people of the tribe were not evil. They even gave Ning a cream so that her sprained leg could heal quickly. Siu and the tribe leader chatted. It turned out to be true that General Lei had come to their tribe to ask for cooperation, but the tribe leader refused because he already knew General Lei was a rebel. Siu explained that General Lei had killed his teacher, Yin Xing, therefore he came looking for him to seek revenge. After that, Siu asked Ming to return, and he was going to take her to the capital, but unfortunately, this was rejected by Ning. She wanted to stay with him, so she was determined to come to the border city. The two of them argued, and finally, Siu chose to give in and leave, but he didn't go from there. He just waited outside like he used to do when they were little. Siu often looked after Ning while she slept. The next morning, Ning took him to a remote village where she was trapped, and his horse was killed. Siu intended to kill them all because they had dared to hurt Ning, but the village's condition was even more miserable. They had nothing to eat due to being a victim of war. Hearing this, Ning felt sorry and immediately left. At the capital, the king found out that Ning went to the border city to follow Siu. He ordered Lin to immediately go and pick her up because, after all, Ning was the successor of the kingdom. If the enemy kingdom found out about Ning's identity, it would be very dangerous. Lin conveyed the information that the governor in the border city had committed corruption and embezzled tax money so that the people in the border city were suffering even more. Lu immediately took the information letter and did not believe the news, as it turned out that the governor was his own younger brother, and he was sure that his younger brother could not possibly commit such a crime. A debate broke out between the two. The king calmed down the debate and said that to be able to prove all the information, they could only hand it over to Sci-fi, because only Sci-fi was currently in the border city. In the border city, Sci-fi was seen drinking with the governor of the border town, Gu Lan, Lu's younger brother. Gu Lan openly bribed Sci-fi to keep him quiet about the corruption in the border city, but Sci-fi firmly refused the bribe money because he intended to arrest him and take him back to the capital to be executed. Gu Lan was furious and said that his older brother, Luo, was the military minister in the capital who would definitely protect him. Moreover, Sci-fi had no evidence to arrest him. However, Save Yilin called his troops and managed to arrest a witness, and even had evidence that all this time, Gu Lan had faked the seal of the kingdom so that he could commit corruption and embezzle tax money. The witness there confirmed all the crimes that Gu Lan had committed and was willing to be a witness at the trial. Gu Lan panicked. Sci Yilin immediately ordered the troops to arrest him, and he would be taken back to the capital. Meanwhile, Siu and his men began to discuss ways to get Ning to return to the capital, because he had done everything but still Ning refused to return. Unfortunately, his subordinates couldn't provide any help because only Siu could do it himself. After that, he approached Ning, who was alone. He slowly asked Ning to return to the capital because the border city was very dangerous. There were lots of conflicts and wars in that place, and even the residents often committed crimes. Ning ignored everything he said, as she wanted to stay by his side whatever happened. Lu got the results of the report, which turned out that his younger brother had indeed committed corruption and embezzled tax money. Sci Yilin had gathered all the evidence in the border city, and Gu Lan would soon arrive in the capital to receive punishment. Lu was very shocked after finding out the truth. He ordered his men to pick up his brother when he arrived in the capital because he wanted to meet. The border city troops who brought Gu Lan had arrived in the capital. Lu's men asked that Gu Lan be handed over to him because Lu, the military minister, wanted to meet his younger brother. The troops were forced to hand over Gu Lan to him. Gu Lan smiled cunningly, thinking his brother would save him. However, after meeting Lu, it wasn't protection that he got, but anger from Lu, who didn't expect that he would commit a crime like that, because as they know, the punishment for officials who committed corruption was the death penalty. Gu Lan begged for protection because it was only him, Lu's only remaining family, and if he was sentenced to death, then Lu would be alone. Hearing this, Lu was intrigued to save his brother so that he wouldn't be sentenced to death. Lu then met Lin to ask for forgiveness for his brother, but Lin refused and would sentence Gu Lan to death according to the regulations in the kingdom, because if he was merciful, then many officials would begin committing the same crime. Lu then met the king and asked for mercy to revoke the death sentence for his younger brother to the point of crying, because Gu Lan was the only family he had. But unfortunately, the king couldn't do anything because the decision was in Lin's hands. After all, Lin was the minister of law. The king also couldn't give mercy because it meant that he didn't give a good example to other officials. He told Lu to discuss the matter again with Lin and persuaded him not to sentence Gu Lan to death because that was the only thing that could be done at this time. Long story short, the day of the execution had arrived. Gu Lan and several of his subordinates were seen. When Gu Lan was about to be executed, he screamed for forgiveness and was willing to do anything if he was forgiven, but suddenly, Lin took the mashite and immediately executed him without mercy. This made Lu very shocked. He could only say while crying that his entire family had been wiped out by Lin, and one day, karma would befall him. No matter what Lu said, Lin immediately ordered the troops to execute all the prisoners. When returned to his house, Lin met his wife, who was currently pregnant, but suddenly seemed to be avoiding her. At this time, he started to be haunted by guilt, and all of Lu's words about karma were ringing in his head. Meanwhile, Sci Yilin received a message from the king telling him to return to the capital. At first, he refused and was reluctant to return before he succeeded in capturing General Lei, the traitor who was still alive to this day. However, he also received a message which said that Ning was currently in the border city and was following Xiu. Sci Yilin was ordered to pick her up and take her back to the capital. Seeing the message, he had no other choice but to do it. A messenger from Sci Yilin came to meet Ning at the border city and wanted to pick her up to take her home on orders from the king. Ning couldn't do anything but ask for one more day to stay, and after that, she was willing to return to the capital. Ning and Xiu chatted one-on-one before parting. Ning said that she would still wait for him to return to the capital, no matter how long. After saying that, Ning then left there feeling sad, but she covered her sadness with a short smile. Before Ning left, Xiu prepared a horse and some provisions for her. Currently, Ning disguised herself as a soldier to cover her identity as a princess during the journey, and this was Xiu's idea so that she would stay safe. After Ning left, Siu went upstairs and while using binoculars to see her departure. It was clear that he was very sad about the separation, but he had to remember his current mission, which was to hunt down General Lei to avenge his teacher's death. At night, when gathering with the tribe leader, Siu received information that General Lei was found. He immediately asked his troops to stop drinking and prepare because General Lei's whereabouts had been found and they had to act immediately. While the entire army was preparing for the attack, Siu was preparing his sword. General Lei and the rest of his troops continued their journey toward the northern clan to get protection and intended to betray the Sichuan kingdom, but before they could get to their destination, Siu and his troops came to attack them. Everyone was seen fighting and Siu fought against General Lei to avenge him. When he almost succeeded in killing him, suddenly, an eagle belonging to the northern clan disturbed the fight and General Lei fell into the ravine. Turned out that he still survived even though he was seriously injured. There he met a masked man from the northern clan, but unfortunately, he fainted shortly after. Siu and his troops searched for General Lei in the ravine. Unfortunately, General Lei's whereabouts failed to be found and he had disappeared. Siu realized that the northern clan had saved him because General Lei had kept information from the Sichuan kingdom. It was certain that the northern clan would use it to attack the border city, or maybe General Lei had the intention of betraying the Sichuan kingdom and joining the enemy to get protection. But all of that was just his guess, which could most likely come true. And if that happened, then they had to strengthen the security of the border city. The next day, General Lei woke up with his men tied. The elders of the northern clan came to them and performed a ritual. After the ritual was completed, the elder there said that General Lei and his men had been purified and officially joined the northern clan. Meanwhile, the king summoned all the nobles in the Sichuan kingdom to discuss the future of the border city. None of the nobles wanted to move to the border city to become governor because they were afraid. Even a few of them agreed if the king let go of the border city and handed it over to the northern clan so that this war could be stopped. Not long after that, Lin came. It was clear that he was very angry with all their words because the entire army sacrificed their lives to fight to defend the border city, while they had the audacity to say that. The nobles did not like the presence of Lin, who was considered just an ordinary minister, and it was not appropriate to argue with them. Lin once again confirmed that the border city would not be handed over to the northern clan. The entire army would fight tooth and nail to defend it, unlike the nobles who took refuge in the capital. The king calmed down the debate and asked Lin to leave. Before Lin left, he killed one of the nobles as a form of warning to the other nobles not to speak carelessly. They were very surprised to see that even the king couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, Ning had finally returned home, accompanied safely by Sai Yelin. King the king's adopted daughter there, told Ning to come in because her uncle called. Then King tried to invite Sai Yilin to chat because she hadn't seen him for a long time, but Sai Yilin tried to avoid her while saying that he wanted to go back to his room to rest after the long journey. Ning apologized for her actions. Luckily, the king wasn't angry about that. Ning told him many things about her experience of going to the border city. Many fatalities occurred and residents became victims as a result of the war. She decided to become the king's successor so that in the future she could make the border city prosperous. On hearing this, the king was very happy. After that, Ning went to see Kadan. Kadan was very happy to see that she had returned safely. Ning told him to go see Sai Yilin because he knew the relationship between the two of them. Kadan immediately went to Sai Yilin's room, though she was almost killed because Sai Yilin thought someone trespassed into his room. Kadan came there just to make sure that Sai Yilin was okay. Seeing that Sai Yilin was in good health without the slightest loss, Kadan felt calm. Sai Yilin had a gift for her. When he went to get the gift, Kadan accidentally saw a lot of letters on the table, written how Sai Yilin really missed her. When Sai Yilin returned with the gift, Kadan asked why he hadn't sent the letter he had written to her. Sai Yilin said that he was hesitant. They both were about to kiss but stopped because Ning came. Sai Yilin was summoned to the palace. For his services in killing the rebel troops in the border city, he was given a gift. Not only that, the king apparently intended to match him with King Hearing that, Sci-fi tried to refuse the match because he didn't want to get married, but unfortunately, the king had already decided. Kadan, who heard the news, could only cry. The man she loved would be married to another woman. Ning, as her friend, would help her to be with Sci-fi, but unfortunately, Kadan didn't want to force her will. If she insisted on staying with Sci-fi, she would destroy his future. What was more, she was the daughter of an enemy kingdom. This relationship was, of course, impossible. Meanwhile, in the western of the border city, the Moon Gulf, General Lu Dai attacked. All the Sichuan kingdom troops there. He was able to defeat them with the help of information from General Lei, the traitor. The news reached the king's ears, therefore the king summoned Sci-fi and ordered him to go back to the border city to strengthen the defense. Sci-fi was of course willing to carry out the orders, but before that, he wanted to discuss the king's arranged marriage. He openly admitted that he loved Kadan, the princess of the northern clan. This made the king very surprised and disagreed. The two kingdoms were at war. It was impossible for Sci-fi to marry a woman from an enemy kingdom. Sci-fi promised to win the war and defeat the northern clan, and after that, he would return to the capital and resign from his position. He wanted to become an ordinary citizen so he could marry Kadan and live simply. Because he insisted, the king couldn't do anything other than agree, but on one condition, he had to win the war. The king then gave a pair of bracelets for him and Kadan as a gift from him. Sci-fi immediately went to meet Kadan and told her what had happened. The king agreed to their relationship as long as he won the war this time. It was clear that Kadan refused this. She would rather not be with him than have him go to war where he would probably die, but Sci-fi hugged him and said that he would come back safely. Hearing this, Kadan's heart started to melt, because she believed that he would definitely come home safely and the two would get married. Before they parted, the two of them slept together. Long story short, Sci-fi had arrived at Moon Gulf, western of Border City. He didn't find any troops on guard, but later found out that there were survivors. He immediately went to meet him. The man looked like he was badly traumatized. Seeing him like that, Sci-fi ordered the man to immediately leave for the border city as quickly as possible. In the capital, the king summoned Lin and gave orders to immediately leave for the border city to help Sci-fi fight against the northern clan. At first, Lin refused because his wife was currently pregnant, but the king promised to order many troops and servants to look after his wife. Hearing that, Lin immediately left. Before leaving, he said goodbye to his wife and promised to return as soon as possible so he could see her give birth to their child. His wife asked him to take it easy and to take good care of himself. In the northern clan kingdom, General Lu Dai brought the body of the border city troops that he had killed and showed it to the king. After that, the king ordered General Lei to eat the flesh from the corpse to show his loyalty to the northern clan. After all, he was a traitor to the Sichuan kingdom. It was possible that in the future he would betray the northern clan too. In order to show his loyalty, General Lei took a knife and was about to eat the corpse, but suddenly the king stopped him. Apparently, he was just testing him. He was assured that General Lei was on his side, and was even given the position of commander to organize the war strategy. General Lei was very happy and respected his decision. He also suggested attacking the north of the border city. If they succeeded, the Sichuan kingdom would be easy for them to destroy. Hearing that, the king ordered his troops to follow General Lei's words. Long story short, Sci-fi met with Xu in the border town. They discussed the movements of the northern clan. At this time, Xu showed a map and was sure that the traitorous General Lei would bring troops from the northern clan to attack the north of the border city. Before that happened, they had to act immediately. Meanwhile, Lin was at the fort in the border city, which was being repaired. There was news that the noble teenagers in the city did not want to help in strengthening the fort, so currently, there was a shortage of people and the work was taking a long time. Lin was very angry and ordered to summon all the noble teenagers. If they refused to help, he would step in to drag them all. All the generals and the two princes of the northern clan gathered. The king sent the second prince to organize the war strategy and mobilize all troops. Of course, he was willing to carry out this order. He also asked permission to have General Lei on his side. Because after all, General Lei came from the Sichuan kingdom. At least he could provide a little information about the war tactics that the Sichuan kingdom usually used. When the border city and the northern clan were in the heat at that moment, the king introduced a noble young man named Mr. Ma to Princess Ning. He wanted the two of them to get to know each other better because Mr. Ma was a very famous, educated young man. Ning smiled at the king, even though in her heart she already knew what her uncle meant by that. After leaving, Ning asked Mr. Ma not to agree to what the king said because she had someone special in her heart, Xiu. Hearing this, Mr. Ma smiled. He already knew the relationship between the two of them, who had been together since childhood. He also prayed that Xiu would be able to return safely from the battlefield. In the border city, Xiu received information that Sai Weilan had moved to attack the city of Pa Li belonging to the northern clan. He also intended to immediately follow Sai Weilan without having to invite his troops because he knew that the troops he had just recruited were not skilled enough and would only die in vain, but his troops insisted on coming with him to fight in the war. Xiu could only smile seeing his troops so very loyal to him, and because of that, it was decided that they would leave the very next day. Short story, Sai Weilan and his troops managed to sneak into the city of Palai, one of the cities belonging to the northern clan. Coincidentally, the troops on guard were sleeping so Sai Weilan could easily paralyze them all, and after that, opened the gate so that his troops could enter. The strongest general belonging to the northern clan, General Yu, received information that the city of Palai had been controlled by Sai Weilan. Hearing this, he was very surprised, but he did not want to act rashly. The first thing that had to be done was to cut off the water source to the city. Sooner or later, Sai Weilan and his troops would run out of water supplies, and when it happened, they would attack and reclaim the city. It was revealed that the city of Pa Li previously belonged to the Sichuan kingdom, which was seized by the northern clan in the past. This was the reason Sai Weilan took back the city. He ordered his men to secure food staples and ensure that clean water supplies remained available so that their troops could continue to eat and drink. The next day, Sai Weilan received reports that the springs in Palai had been cut off so that the current water supply was running low. He realized that this must be the work of General Yu, the strongest general of the northern clan. The only thing that could be done was to kill General Yu and get back the stock of clean water, because it was not just them who needed it, but all the citizens of Palai. Meanwhile, Xiu had arrived in front of the northern clan kingdom. He received information that the water source in Palai had been cut off by General Yu. Hearing that, he intended to enter the northern clan kingdom alone and asked his troops to wait there. In the evening, General Yu was visited by his troops and said that the gates of the northern clan kingdom were attacked by a mysterious person, and even the entire troops on guard were wiped out without any remains. Of course, this made General Yu curious about who this person was. Not long afterward, one of the troops came to give a report he claimed from General Lei. General Yu started to get suspicious because none of the troops were wearing masks like him. It was actually Xiu in disguise, but because he had been discovered, he attacked General Yu. It was revealed once again the power Xiu possessed. He attacked General Yu and resulted in cutting off one of his arms. Sai Weilan received a report that troops had attacked the gates of the northern clan kingdom and cut off one of General Yu's arms. Currently, the troops were in front of Palai. Because he was curious, he used binoculars and saw a banner that said, "The handsome and brave third brother." He realized that it was Stu with his troops. He immediately went to meet him and took him into the city. Long story short, General Yu received extensive treatment due to this incident. He was very vengeful and curious about who the young man who attacked him just now. He vowed to avenge him. Not long after, the second prince of the northern clan, together with General Ludi, came to visit General Yu. They wondered how an intruder could cut off one of his hands because everyone knew that General Yu was the strongest. General Yu said he promised to take revenge and kill the intruder who had cut off one of his hands. It turned out that all this time, the second prince was just acting. He and Ludi immediately laughed after they left. Seeing General Yu as a disabled person made the second prince very happy, because since the very start, he never liked him. Meanwhile, the noble teenagers were forced to work to repair the fort of the border city. They complained because they felt humiliated working like that. One of them intended to leave, but suddenly, Lin came and kicked him until he was thrown away. He didn't stop there. The young man was immediately executed. All the noble teenagers were immediately frightened, and no one dared to fight back. Lin said that he wanted the fort to be fully repaired within a week. If anyone dared to disobey his orders, he would kill him. Meanwhile, the Northern Clan's second prince ordered General Lei to lead troops and attack the city of Palai. It was clear that he was a coward who deliberately ordered General Lei to fight. General Lei was of course aware of this, but he couldn't do anything other than follow the orders. He then returned to base camp to tell the matter to his men. From the start, they both came to the Northern Clan to seek protection, but ended up being sacrificed on the battlefield, while if they succeeded in winning the war, the person who got all the credits would be the second prince. This made General Lei annoyed. The next day, General Lei brought thousands of troops to the city of Palai. Not only that, he also deliberately took advantage of the residents to be sacrificed on the front line while forcing them to push a very large cannon. After that, General Lei ordered his troops to bring the people to the front line and be ready to attack. Su, together with Sci-fi, who saw this of course, realized General Lei's rotten plan to deliberately put innocent people on the front lines so they couldn't attack. Therefore, the attack would be taken over by Su. Without his orders, the whole army was prohibited from releasing arrows because they had to save innocent citizens first so they wouldn't become victims. Siu went to make a strategy. He prepared a special weapon, mainly chili, flour, and explosives, and then after that, all these materials were put into a cannon. A cannon filled with flour and then shot so that the enemy troops were blinded temporarily. After successfully blinding some of the enemy troops, they would save the innocent citizens on the front lines and take them into Palai through the side gate. Then Sci-fi and the troops were sent to pick up these citizens. Seeing all this, General Lei became very angry. He ordered the troops to immediately chase and recapture the residents who had fled, but the troops he sent were trapped and could not get out of the city of Palai. Chili powder, explosive bombs, and kerosene were then thrown. After that, they released fire arrows so that the enemy troops immediately burned to death. The residents were saved, and some of the enemy troops were also defeated. Siu ordered Sci-fi to go to war, but only for an hour, considering that they were still outnumbered. If they insisted to continue fighting, they would end up losing the war. In short, after an hour, Siu didn't see a Sci-fi. He felt worried and immediately went down to the battlefield alone to pick Sci-fi up. On the battlefield, the troops were surprised. It turned out that Xiu was great at defending himself. After Xiu succeeded in bringing Sci-fi along with the troops to return to Pali, a cannon was shot to prevent the enemy troops from pursuing. Because of this, General Lei ordered his troops to retreat because he realized that it was impossible to win the war. In the end, Siu won the war. Everyone was very happy because thanks to Chu's very clever strategy, they were able to win without having to sacrifice their life. The defeat of the Northern Clan finally reached General Yu. The first prince of the Northern Clan was very annoyed with his younger brother for sending General Lei to lead the war. General Yu answered that he suspected that Sci-fi had someone very cunning behind him, because after all, the Sichuan kingdom had never used war tactics or strategies like that, and this was the first time. It was their turn to go into battle and must not lose. General Yu, even though without one of his arms, would still go out to fight while looking for the young man who made him like that to get revenge. Meanwhile, Sci-fi showed Siu the bracelet given to him by the king as a sign that the king approved his relationship with Kandan, but the condition was that he had to be able to win the war. Siu asked what he would do if the king broke his promise and didn't approve of the relationship. Sci-fi answered that he would carry out a rebellion. Siu then smiled and said whatever he would do, he would support him. Long story short, General Yu was approached by a bird, which turned out to be the incarnation of a masked man. The person was a military advisor of the Northern Clan. He told General Yu to be careful, because the Sichuan kingdom had someone with special powers beyond human reason, who was the one who attacked and cut off one of his arms. That man couldn't be taken lightly. The troops from the northern clan were already in front of the city of Palais. Siu saw this and realized that enemy troops had been there for several days, but strangely, there was no movement at all. He then called his men and asked for the results of the inspection. His subordinates said that the food supplies available were only enough to last the next 10 days, and if the enemy troops didn't attack, they would eventually run out of food. Siu immediately realized that this was the reason the enemy troops didn't attack, because they were waiting for them to run out of food and become weak. Meanwhile, Lin received information that Siu and Sai Yuilin were trapped in the city of Pa Li and were running out of food, while the troops of the northern clan were preparing to attack. Hearing this, Lin became angry because his two brothers were reckless. He wanted to go to the city of Pa Li and ordered his troops there to bring all their food. The female general asked why he wanted to leave, even though he said that Sai Yuilin and Siu were reckless. While smiling, Lin answered that he was the same as them.